Good afternoon. Oh, you can do better than that. Come on. Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Craig Galinski. I'm music director here at John Knox. You're not only going to listen to music today, you're going to learn a little bit about each period before I play them. Our next concert is the Christmas concert, December 8th at 4 o'clock here in the sanctuary. Silence your cell phones, please. That's quite distracting. Want to remind everyone there is a drum in the back for donations to help with our performance series. Just a warning to all of you who have hearing aids, the organ is going to be played today like it's supposed to be played, so you might have to adjust the volume accordingly. Just a quick test. What do you think, look at your programs, what do you think the most played piece in the world is? The Bach. The Bach is correct. The second most played? The Viter, you got it. And what do you think is the most difficult for the hands? All of them. Well, you'll find out at the end. To me, it's the Viter, and for the pedal work, believe it or not, it's the Mozart. We will start off in the medieval period. Though we can assume that music began far before 1150, the medieval period is the first in which we can be sure as to how music sounded during this time. Most notated manuscripts from the medieval period came from the church or places connected to the church, and so most pieces have a religious subject. Instruments used during this time included the flute, the recorder, and plucked string instruments like the lute. Early versions of the organ and fiddle also existed. Perhaps the most known type of music to come out of the medieval period was the Gregorian chant. Gregorian chants were monophonic, which is a single unaccompanied melody line, most commonly sung by monks. Though the monophonic style was a staple in the medieval period, it's important to note that polyphonic genres also developed in this time. Polyphony is the use of multiple independent voice types as opposed to monophony. It can be concluded that the introduction of harmony began in the medieval period. Though a large portion of the music written in this era is not attributed to any author, John Dunstable, Adam de la Helle, Philippe de Vitry, Guillaume de Michaud, and Francesco Landini were all notable composers in this period. The first piece is by Periton. He is French composer. He introduces 3- and 4-part harmonies, perfect fourths and fifths, which are a big no-no nowadays. And this is referred to as the Ars Antigua style. The second piece is called Cinco un Trece by Guillaume de Michaud. His music is based on courtly love. This is the Ars Nova style. There's more rhythmic flexibility, and it's pretty much dance-like. Short but sweet. Now we move on to the Renaissance period. The Renaissance brought significantly increased amounts of harmony and polyphony into music. Religious music continued to flourish throughout the entire Renaissance period, including new forms such as masses, anthems, psalms, and motets. Some composers of sacred music began to adopt secular forms, such as the madrigal, towards the end of the period. Instrumentation became more prominent during this period with the introduction of early brass instruments, slide trumpet, cornet, valveless trumpet, and sackbut, which is trombone, earlier trombone. Adapted string instruments, the viol, the rebec, the lyre, the lute, and the guitar, the harpsichord, small percussion instruments, triangle, tambourine, bells, small drums, early woodwind instruments, reed pipe, bagpipe, transverse flute, and recorder. The second half of the Renaissance period was incredibly influential as composers began to move away from the modal system of harmony and towards the organization of major and minor scales. The strong sensation of each piece having a definitely tonal center or key became commonplace in the Renaissance period. Notable composers of the Renaissance include William Byrd, John Dowland, Orlando Gibbons, Giovanni Pierluigi da Palestrina, and Thomas Tallis. The musical output of medieval England was prodigious, yet almost all music manuscripts were destroyed during the English Reformation, particularly due to the dissolution of the monasteries in 1536 to 40. The next song is the Agincourt hymn. This was written in 1415 by Dunstable. Only about 50 of his manuscripts survive. This piece recounts the 1450 Battle of Agincourt, in which the English army, led by King Henry V of England, defeated that of the French Charles VI. And be prepared, there's loud trumpets. Told you that was loud. The next piece is Gloria Tibi Trinitas by Thomas Tallis, English composer. It means glory be to the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. This is set in an English round, only 2 voices because we're still early in the periods. Now we get to the fun stuff. Excuse me. Entering the Baroque period. Expanding upon the end of the Renaissance period, the Baroque period saw the creation of writing music in a particular key. However, the Baroque period is commonly known for complex pieces and intricate harmonies. Still, this period laid the groundwork for the next 300 years of music. The idea of the modern orchestra was born, along with opera, the concerto, sonata, and cantata. Choral music was no longer king, as composers turned to compose instrumental works for various ensembles. Classical music gradually began to work its way into society, being played outdoors at dinner parties and special functions, or as a spectacle in the form of opera. And as instrumental pieces became more prominent, individual instruments advanced drastically. Many new instruments emerged, such as the oboe, bassoon, cello, contrabass, and forte piano, which is an early version of the piano. The string family of the Renaissance was replaced with stronger sounds from the violin, viola, and cello. The invention of the harpsichord flourished, and all existing woodwind and brass instruments were updated and advanced. The Baroque period also introduced stronger percussion with instruments like the timpani, snare drum, tambourine, and castanets. Early Baroque composers included Claudio Monteverdi, Alessandro Scarlatti, Henry Purcell, and Jean-Baptiste Lully, while later Baroque composers included who other than the father of Baroque music, J.S. Bach, George Frederick Handel, George Philip Telemann, Jean-Philippe Rameau, Domenico Scarlatti, and Antonio Vivaldi. These later composers contributed substantially in the transition to classical music, and the Baroque period ended with Bach's death. The first piece is by Buxtehude. He was a Danish-German composer. It's called the Jig Fugue, very early fugue style, very little use of pedal, but you'll see, I've played it in church before, you'll like it. Okay, the next one is Toccata and Fugue in D minor by Bach, composed in 1704. And what amazes me, he was only 18 years old when he wrote this. Just a little bit about the piece. This is the beginning of the grand organ period. The difference between an organ and a grand organ is at least 5 manuals, 5 of the keyboards, has 104 stops and 4,000 pipes. If you think this organ's loud. Just a little bit about the toccata so you know what you're listening for. The toccata begins with a single voice flourish in the upper ranges of the keyboard, doubled at the octave, and ornamented with a lower mordent. It then spirals toward the bottom, where a diminished 7th chord appears built 1 note at a time. This resolves into a D major chord. 3 short passages follow, each reiterating a short motif and doubled at the octave. The section ends with the diminished 7th chord, which resolves into the tonic D minor through a flourish. The second section of the toccata is a number of loosely connected figurations and flourishes. The pedal switches to the dominant A minor. This section segues into the third and final section of the toccata, which consists almost entirely of a passage doubled at the 6th and comprising reiterations of the same 3-note figure, similar to doubled passages in the first section. After a brief pedal flourish, the piece ends with the D minor chord. Then we go into the fugue, if that's not bad enough. The subject of the 4-voice fugue is made up entirely of 16th notes, with an implied pedal point set against a brief melodic subject that first falls, then rises. Such violinistic figures are frequently encountered in Baroque music, and that of Bach, both as fugue subjects and as material in non-imitative pieces. Unusually, the answer is in the subdominant key rather than the traditional dominant. Although technically a 4-part fugue, most of the time there are only 3 voices, and some of the interludes are in 2 or even 1 voice. Although only simple triadic harmony is employed throughout the fugue, there is an unexpected C minor subject entry, and furthermore, a solo pedal statement of the subject, a unique feature for a Baroque fugue. Immediately after that, the final subject entry, the fugue resolves to a sustained B-flat chord. A multi-sectional coda follows. Although only 17 bars long, it progresses through 5 tempo changes. The last bars are played molto adagio, and the piece ends with a minor plagal cadence. The meaning of the toccata is basically to show virtuosity. And the fugue is a 4-voice. It usually comes in, one voice comes in, and then the second voice comes in on the dominant, and then you repeat all the way down. And I'll meet you at the end. I'm going to say now for something lighter. Now let's move on to the classical period. The classical period expanded upon the Baroque period, adding a majorly influential new song form, the sonata. This period also saw the development of the concerto, symphony, sonata, trio, and quartet. The classical period is most known for its compulsion for structural clarity in music. Though this period didn't add any majorly new instrumentation, the harpsichord was officially placed with the piano. Orchestras increased in size, range, and power, and instrumentation overall had a lighter, more evident texture than Baroque music, making it less complicated. Notable composers from the classical period include musical giants Joseph Haydn, Ludwig van Beethoven, Franz Schubert, and of course, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. The first song is Trio in F by Krebs. Basically, it's two voices echo each other with a separate bass line. Now we have the Fantasy in F minor by Mozart. Basically sonata form, or if you think of it, ABA, or you can think of it as exposition, development, recapitulation, coda, you can think of it all those things. During the last decade of Mozart's life, he exploited chromatic harmony. He wrote very few organ pieces, but composed this right before his death. This is the way I hear it. 1,000 varying emotions are aroused by the terrifying allegro, with its artful fugue subject in the strict style. The listener is startled at the violent modulation to F sharp minor and imagines the ground shaking beneath him. The lovely, so tenderly expressed adagio in A flat major is music of the spheres. It elicits tears of longing for heaven. The repeat of the opening allegro catapults us back into troubled human existence. The two mutually belligerent fugue subjects impart a striking, serious, powerful image of the battle of the passions. Only at the end is there calm. Power is exhausted, human nature has died, and the soul escapes the body. The end signifies the life to come. Now we move on to the Romantic period. Is this ever going to end, right? Beethoven and Schubert bridged the gap between the classical and Romantic periods of music. Just as one might assume from the word romantic, this period took classical music and added overwhelming amounts of intensity and expression. As the period developed, composers gradually let go of heavily structured pieces and gravitated towards drama and emotion. The Romantic period was the golden age of the virtuoso, where the most difficult music would be performed with nonchalant ease. Not from me. Instrumentation became even more prominent, with orchestras growing to higher numbers than ever before. Composers experimented in new ways, trying out unique instrumentation combinations and receiving new horizons in harmony. Public concerts and operas moved away from the exclusivity of royalty and riches and into the hands of the urban middle-class society for all to enjoy. The Romantic period was also the first period where national music schools began to appear. This era produced some of music's most adored composers, including Hector Berlioz, Frédéric Chopin, Felix Mendelssohn, Robert Schumann, Franz Liszt, Johannes Brahms, Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky, and Richard Wagner. The very end of the Romantic period also brought about composers Gustav Mahler, Richard Strauss, Giacomo Puccini, John Sibelius, Camille Saint-Saëns, Gabriel Fauré, and Sergei Rachmaninoff. The next two pieces are by French composers. The Chorale in La Mineur by Franck. He had huge hands, which tells you what's coming up. He could reach a 12th, where most of us can't even reach an octave. Very contrapuntally complex. This was written in 1890 after he had an accident in a horse buggy, of all things. He hit his head and died months later. This piece is in the same style as what we just did with the Mozart Fantasy, with more chromaticism and dissonance. Next is Wieder. This was composed in 1879. Everyone knows this one. The fourth movement is just a prayerful introduction to the toccata, which everyone knows. The fifth movement, the toccata, in F major is often referred to as just Wieder's toccata because it is his most famous piece. The melody of Wieder's toccata is based upon an arrangement of rapid staccato arpeggios which form phrases, initially in F, moving in fifths through to C major, D major, E major, B, and so on. The melody, each phrase consists of one bar. The melody is complemented by syncopated chords, forming an accented rhythm against the perpetual arpeggio motif. The phrases are contextualized by a descending bass line, often beginning with the seventh tone of each phrase key. For example, where the phrase consists of an arpeggio in C major, the bass line begins with B flat. The arpeggios eventually modulate through all 12 keys until Wieder brings the symphony to a close, crossing the hands on the last page with fortissimo block chords in the final three bars. Now we move on to the 20th and 21st century, which basically was a free reign for composers, didn't care what keys, if you hit on a flower pot, it didn't matter. Each period we've described up until the 20th and 21st century had a general set of guidelines and characteristics that most composers followed. Over time, composers have been pulling further and further away from rules and restrictions into what is ultimately now a place of complete free reign. Classical music is now a place for the ultimate experimentation, and though it may not be as popular in 2024 as it was in 1800, it certainly has not disappeared. Prolific composers in this period include Igor Stravinsky, Bela Bartok, Dmitri Shostakovich, Claude Debussy, Maurice Ravel, Gustav Holst, Arnold Schoenberg, and many more. Possibly one of the most famous classical pieces of music ever was composed during this time, Clair de Lune by Debussy. The last piece that I'm going to play, and no, it's not over, I'm going to talk after that, is the Partita on St. Anne, which is O God, Our Help in Ages Past, by Paul Mons, who is actually a Clevelander who just passed away in 1909, I think it was. He composed this in 1975. It combines pretty much all the forms we've done so far, plus a little strange dissonance, which you can tell is 21st century. I'm not done yet. I'm not, sit, sit, sit. Sit, sit, I'm not done yet. I have 3 more sentences to go. Let me see. Classical music has come a long way, and countless composers have contributed to making it what it is today. Perhaps what we've learned more than anything else is that classical music is one thing: timeless. We still look back to the beginning from time to time and remember the beautiful music so many people made. We're thankful for their hard work, for the wonder they gave us, and the gift of classical music that always keeps giving.